Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. So
much appreciative to my friend and your minister, your pastor, Brother Thomas L. Thomas. Just an amazing friend. When he calls, you got to answer. You may tell him, give me a couple of days, but you definitely have to answer. So appreciative to be here with you this morning. Don't want to belabor the point. Let's get right to it. Genesis chapter 50. Genesis chapter 50, very familiar passage that I think you know. I just want to give you a couple things, hopefully to help you on this hump day this morning. As Brother Thomas stated, my signed topic this morning is getting over the id of hurt. Getting over the id of hurt. We'll begin at verse number 15. Read down to verse number 20. I think if you've never maybe read through this chapter, when you get down to verse number 20, it'll start to make sense to you. So I'll be reading from the New King James Version on this morning. The Bible reads this way. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, before your father died, he commanded us, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we are your servants. And Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? Verse number 20 says, but as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Let me read verse number 20 for you. This is the verse that you should know. This is the verse where we'll camp out today. It said, but as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is today, to save many people alive. Listen, one of my favorite television shows back in the 80s ran from about 1979 to 1988. A lady by the name of Mrs. Garrett ran a house of young ladies at the Eastland School for Girls in Peekskill, New York. Y'all remember the show? Show would come on, they had the song. The song said, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have the facts of life, the facts of life. There's a time you got to go and a show you're growing, and now you're talking about the facts of life. Y'all need to help me out this morning. When the world never seems to be living up to your dreams, then you suddenly find out the facts of life are all about you. Ooh, 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 ooh. Y'all remember that at the end? Miss Garrett's job was to simply teach these young ladies about life, and I believe she did a fairly decent job. But the reality and the end game of it all is that when you live this life, you take the good and the bad. You know that God will always prevail in the end. And when all those things are working together, those are the facts of this life. And the reality is that hurt is one of those facts of this life. The reality is that all of us will be hurt from time to time. If you believe you can live this life and never be hurt, you're sadly mistaken, my friend. If my Jesus has to go to an old rugged cross, be beaten upon and spat upon and have nails placed in his hands, what makes you think that you can make it to glory with perfectly manicured hands without ever having to go through anything? All of us will have to deal with some hurt in this life. I believe that there are three things that this text teaches us. We'll camp out in verse number 20. Write these down. If you're the note-taking type, I'll give you the notes on the front end, and then we'll just walk through the text on this morning. The first thing you've got to write down if you're going to understand that you're going to get over your hurt is this. Never let what they did to you change who you are. Never let what they did to you change who you are. That's paramount, church, that you keep in mind that you can't let folks change who you are. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Never let what they did to you change who you are. Not only do you not need to never let what they did to you change you, but the second thing is this. Never let the way it looks currently dictate your faith in the conclusion. Never let the way it looks currently dictate your faith in the conclusion. I wish I had about 3 or 4 folks on here this morning who can testify. I've been through some stuff that in real time, it didn't look good, but in the final summation of it all, God worked that thing out in my favor. Yeah, never let what they did to you change who you are, and never let the way it looks currently dictate your faith. But lastly and finally, we'll see in this text, and I think this is one of the most important things we got to grasp today, is that you can never let your hurt stand in the way of your decision to help. Never let your hurt stand in the way of your decision to help. There's somebody on this call this morning who's already made the decision that I'm not fooling with nobody. I'm not helping nobody. I'm not engaging in no more ministry. I'm not coming around no more. I'm not picking up no phone calls. I'm not responding to no text messages because I'm still dealing with the stuff that they did to me. Listen, you can never let the hurt, your hurt, stand in the way of your decision to help. Is that all right? Our text this morning, verse number 20 says, but as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Our text this morning is a very familiar text. This 20th verse is often quoted and asserted and interjected, and oftentimes without undergirding of the proper context. If framed properly and understood holistically, it can change the spiritual paradigm of any true believer. Our text introduces us to a man by the name of Joseph. You know Joseph, he's 11th of Jacob's 12 sons. He's the first son of Rachel's. Joseph's birth signified God finally blessing Rachel with the gift of conception. While it's easy to assume that Joseph's birthplace and the significance of his birth, given his mother's struggle with God, would be his reason for folks to hate on him, for his brothers to hate on him, for his brothers to be jealous of him, that really wasn't it. That wasn't what brought the adversity into Joseph's life. You see, the problem for Joseph was the fact that Joseph was a dreamer. You just missed your first shout this morning. Listen, the problem for Joseph was not who Joseph was or the way Joseph came into the world. The problem with Joseph was Joseph's giftedness. Church, you need to understand this morning that some folks can only be comfortable with the right now you. I'm preaching already. The moment you begin to start talking about dreams, some folks become uncomfortable. The moment you begin to start talking about becoming better, becoming more, moving from one level to the next level, being a better version of you, some folks will become uncomfortable with you. Listen, we all know how crabs in a bucket operate, right? When we typically look at crabs in a bucket, we'll see crabs as one is trying to get out, another crab is pulling them back down. Good God Almighty. And when you look at these crabs in the bucket, as one crab is trying to escape to a better situation, what you see is another crab is pulling him back down, hence the term we use all the time, crabs in a bucket, right? But really what happens when you study crustaceans is this. It's not that as one crab is trying to escape, another crab is intentionally pulling him down, but what really happens is that the crab on the bottom is simply trying to escape, and his limited knowledge leads him to the place where the only way he knows how to escape is by pulling somebody else back down. I wish you could see this. Some folk will hurt you because the only way they know how to help themselves is by hurting other folks. Can you see this? In their mind, I'm not really hurting you, Thomas. I'm just trying to help myself in this situation. I'm not really hating on you by going and telling the boss that you was a couple minutes late. I'm just trying to get a promotion. I'm not really hating on you by saying this or saying that. I'm really just trying to do what's in my best interest. Joseph's brothers, I don't really believe, thought that hating on him was about him. It was about the fact that they didn't get a coat of many colors. It was about the fact that they wanted to be daddy's favorite. It was about what's in this for me. And the moment that you begin to understand that your hate on me, your hurt towards me is really the fact that you can't deal with what you got going on internalized in your own life, it makes it easier for me to move past the hurt that you put on my life. Listen, in this text, the gift of being able to interpret dreams was problematic for Joseph, but it also saved Joseph's life. I need you to see this. The same thing sometimes that causes folks to hurt you can be the same thing that can heal you. Good God Almighty. He survives throughout the text because of this giftedness. He survives a very important chapter in chapter 47 of Genesis because of what God had placed him in chapter 37 of Genesis. What are you saying here, Gary? I'm saying that you ought to stop letting folk who hurt you in today's time stop you from using the giftedness that God placed in you to use on down the road. You need to understand that what you're experiencing right now, the stuff that you're going through right now is simply preparing you for the next chapter of your life. Chapter 37, you need to understand that his daddy gives him this coat, this tunic of many colors. And not only does he have this tunic of many colors, but Joseph has this thing where he likes to dream. And the problem for Joseph wasn't that he just dreamed, but Joseph went and started telling people about his dream. Everybody won't be able to handle your vision. Everybody don't need access to what God is doing in your life. Everybody don't need to have access to what God has deposited into you. Sometimes the fact of the matter is some folk are just jealous and they hurt you because they're jealous of what God is doing with you. It's not, you know what? I give you one better. It's not even about the fact that God is doing it with you. It's about the fact that God chose not to do it with them. Can you see it? When we walk through this text in chapter 37, they decided that I've had enough of this Joseph fella. We just gonna hurt him once and for good. We just gonna get rid of this joker, right? They go and they decide they're gonna strip him of the jacket and they're gonna get rid of him and sell him and all that stuff. And they come back. And when Reuben returned, the coat was left behind, right? I wish you could see this. They used the same thing that made them jealous of him to celebrate his demise. It was the same coat that they used to be jealous of him. It was what they used to celebrate him. You need to be careful of who you give proximity to your gift, because the moment that they get a chance, might flip that thing on you. It's chapter 39, Potiphar's wife makes an accusation. He's thrown into prison. When we get to chapter 40, the cupbearer and the baker in prison with him, and they say, when we get out, man, we're gonna take care of you. We're gonna make sure you get out of here. And they forgot about him for a couple of years. In chapter 41, he gets to interpret Pharaoh's dream, and then God begins to position him for what is to come. In Genesis 42 and 43, 44, 45, they start to make trips back to Egypt. And when he gets to chapter 49, Jacob blesses his family, and then he dies. And then when he gets to chapter 50, the family has to return to Joseph, because when folk hurt you at some point in life, God has a way of bringing those folk right back to you to need you. And so what I've learned in this life is that you ain't really got to hurt folk when hurt folk hurt you. What you got to do is just sit back and let God do what God does. And God has a way of pulling the car back around one more time, right? Well, one of my good friends, somebody that you all may know, right there in New York, had him out to campus, and we developed a friendship. A fellow by the name of Raymond Santana of the Central Park Five, with Exonerated Five. I asked him one time, I said, man, how do you deal with all the stuff that you had to deal with, the folks hating on you, and Trump taking out an article and saying that y'all were this and y'all were that? How do you deal with that? Just folks just hating you and hurting you like that? And he said, you know what, man, I don't even try to get back at him. He said, you know why? Because my biggest flex in life is that even though he tried to hurt me, he got to watch me be successful for every day for the rest of my life. But sometimes your biggest flex is not about getting back at them. It's just the fact that folks got to watch your channel every day. I really thought that Thomas was going to fall flat on his face, and look at it. Roosevelt-Freeport is still doing good. I can't believe it. I thought that Samantha would just quit that job and walk away. And I can't believe she's still doing. Sometimes your biggest flex is the fact that folks still got to watch what God is doing in your life. Let me pause here for a moment and speak to the person and who's still waiting on God to make it all better. You need to understand that what happened to you is not who you are. You need to know that there's a big difference between who you are and what you've been through. It's a big difference between who you are and what you've been through. You can't let what they did to you change who you are. But in addition to that, church, you ought to never let the way it looks currently dictate your faith in the conclusion. Look at the text. Verse number 20, again, right? Says, now, but as for you, you meant it for evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to do what? To bring it about as it is today, to save many people alive. The story of Joseph is really a story of a truly tested faith. We see different examples of faith in scripture, but nobody really speaks to this tested faith like Joseph does. Enoch shows us the walk of faith. Noah shows us the perseverance of faith. Abraham shows us the obedience of faith. Isaac shows us the power of faith. Jacob shows us the discipline of faith. But Joseph shows us the triumph of faith. How you win if you just would keep on holding on. In chapter 40, we were reminded that the cupbearer and the baker, when they were in prison, the cupbearer said, man, when I get out, man, I'm going to tell somebody about you. We're going to get you out of here. And for 2 years, they forgot about Joseph. Somebody this morning feels like God has forgotten about you. You feel like God just said you were going to take care of this. You were going to make the hurt better. But I've had to sit in this for far longer than I thought I'd have to. I'm still bleeding when I thought I would have scabbed up by now. I'm still struggling with this. You need to understand that God is simply preparing you for your palace moment while you sit in your pit. Joseph says, you meant evil against me. He confronts their intentionality. You meant to do me some harm. You meant to destroy me. It was your intention to try to hurt me. And listen, sometimes as people of God, we like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that you just didn't mean it like that. I know you didn't mean to do that to me. I know you didn't mean to say it the way you said it, but this is how it came. The reality is that there are some people who mean to do you evil. And you've got to accept that. You've got to figure out, however, how do I move beyond this hurt? How do I deal with it? I can see the apostle born out of due season, Paul, in Romans chapter 8, right around verse 28, saying that all things work together for the good of them who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And so I have to ask Paul the question, well, Paul, are you saying that my hurt works together for my good? Are you saying that my pain works together for my good? Are you saying losing my job works together for my good? Are you saying divorce works together for my good? Are you saying being in this economic strain works together for my good? Are you saying the doctor saying that there's nothing else they can do for me works together for my good? Are you saying having children who are struggling works together for my good? Are you saying being at the point where I just don't want to go to church today because I just ain't feeling it no more works together for my good? Are you saying having to balance what I look like, what I believe, and these flashing red and blue lights behind me is working together for my good? Are you saying that just strictly trying to be a Christian in this society is working for my good? Are you saying trying to make the society a better place, but I can't find a candidate that aligns with your will and your way is working for my good? Are you saying that the folks who I thought would always be there for me, but then when I needed them the most, they ran away from me, is working for my good? Are you saying that the folks that I always came through for, who could never come through for me, that's working for my good? Are you saying that when the brotherhood got this to say about me and that to say about me, is working for my good? Well, how's all that working for my good, Paul? I know they meant it for evil. But you're saying, and Joseph's saying, that somehow this thing is going to work out for my good. And when I'm in that 2-year period between my promise and my delivery, that's when it hurts more, right? Think about it in the physical sense. The pain seems to hurt more on the ride between when you saying I need to go to the doctor and when you get to the doctor. You at the house and your stomach hurt, yeah, it hurt. But when you're on the way to the emergency room, it seems like the pain intensifies, right? Because I'm anticipating I'm going to get some relief. Only to get to the emergency room, and sometimes I got to sit and wait a little bit longer. That's nothing like anticipating some relief from the hurt in your life. And God just keeps on moving that carrot back a little bit further, because I'm going to move it back a little bit further. And really what he's teaching you in that moment is that you're a little bit stronger than what you thought you were. You're a little bit, it's not hurting you as bad as you thought it hurt you. It's going to work out for your good. He says, I know you meant it for evil, but God meant it. God has some other plans for what was happening in my life. When we get to this point in verse 20 of chapter 50, they had come face to face with the brother that they had written off. They had come face to face with the brother that they had hurt. Somebody on this Zoom this morning knows what it's like to have been written off. Somebody knows what it's like to have been told that you won't be amount to anything. Somebody knows what it's like to be told that the mistake that you made was going to break you. And you know what it's like to be told that you don't look the part, or that you don't dress the part, or you don't have all the certifications, or you don't have all the right connections, or you don't have all the right political or professional affiliations. Somebody knows what it's like to be told that you were going to be a statistic, that you weren't going to make it. You know what it's like to be told that child that you had out of wedlock was going to define you. You know what it's like to be told that failed marriage was going to cripple you, or that habit that you had was going to define you. You know what it's like to be told you're going to end up dead or in prison. Somebody's doctor has told you already that you wasn't going to make it. They told you that the odds were stacked against you. Told you that the medicine may and it may not work. They told you you were out of your options. They told you that the insurance wouldn't cover it. They told you you wouldn't be able to bounce back. But what they didn't know is that God refused to let it be. Preach, Gary, I promise you I am. What they couldn't comprehend is just because they held expectation, it doesn't mean that God was going to bring it into existence. Let me say that one more time. Just because somebody else held expectation over my life doesn't mean that God was going to bring existence into my life. Let me help you one more time. Just because somebody else brings expectation in over my life doesn't mean that God is going to bring existence into my life. You may have meant it for my evil, but God had something else planned. Somebody ought to say, I'm still here this morning. If you can truly comprehend just how good God has been to you, even in the midst of your hurt, even in the midst of your pain, considering everything that you've been through. Is there anybody here this morning not ashamed to raise your hand and testify that I know that God has some plans for my life? Jeremiah reminded me that he's got some plans not to hurt me, some plans for me to prosper. God's got some stuff that he still has me for do. He's got some purpose on on my life. And any time that the enemy's plans come into conflict with God's purpose, I already know how that thing gonna turn out. You need to remind yourself that anytime the enemy's plans come into conflict with my God's purpose, I already know how that thing is going to turn out. Matter of fact, Thomas, I done got to the point where I started looking for the enemy's plans, because I know when the enemy's plans come, that means that God's purpose is close, and I ain't even got to really worry about that thing no more. I wish you could see the reciprocity of how sowing and reaping works. God has set it up so that the same folks who tried to set you up are now the same folk who need you. You ever had somebody to burn that bridge and then try to walk back across it? the folks that hurt you, they come back and act like they, oh, was it me? I didn't even know that Listen, even as bad as that is, I'm about to close right here. Never let your hurt stand in the way of your decision to help. No matter how bad they did it to you. Never let your hurt stand in the way of your decision to help. God was sustaining them by sustaining Joseph. He sustained them by sustaining Joseph. Makes me ask the question, what happens when you realize that your deliverance is tied to the person that you did wrong? What happens? He says you meant it for evil, but God meant it for my good. He was the same person in the pit, in the prison, and in the palace. And I'm not talking about Joseph, although he was. I'm talking about God was the same in the pit, in the prison, and the palace. But I need you to see the immediate good in this situation. If this large family did not come to Egypt and live, it would have perished in the famine. And had the family barely survived, it would have assimilated to the Canaanite tribe surrounding it. Only by coming to Egypt could they be preserved and grow into a distinct nation. What are you saying, Gary? I'm saying this, very simply put. If Joseph's brothers never sold him to the Midianites, then Joseph would have never gone to Egypt. And if Joseph had never gone to Egypt, he would have never been sold to Potiphar. And if Joseph had never been sold to Potiphar, Potiphar's wife would have never falsely accused him of rape. And if Potiphar's wife would have never falsely accused him of rape, then Joseph would have never been put in prison. And if Joseph would have never been put in prison, he would have never met the baker and the butler of the Pharaoh. And if Joseph never met the baker and the butler of the Pharaoh, he would have never interpreted their dreams. And if Joseph would have never interpreted their dreams, he would have never interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh. And if Joseph never interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he would have never become prime minister, second in Egypt only to Pharaoh. And if Joseph never became prime minister, he would have never wisely prepared for the terrible famine to come. If Joseph would have never prepared for the terrible famine to come, then his family back in Canaan would have died in the famine. I want you to see this. If Joseph's family back in Canaan died in the family, then the Messiah could not have come from a dead family. If the Messiah could not have come forth, then Jesus would have never came. And if Jesus would have never came, then we're all dead in our sins with no hope in this world. You ought to be thankful for the stuff you've been through this morning, because what somebody else meant for evil, if you just keep letting that thing play out, he's going to turn it around for your good. You can't let your hurt. You can't let your hurt. You can't let your hurt impact your decision to help. Listen, I close you with this. Listen, I want to the person who hadn't made it to the palace yet, to the person who's dealing with the hurt, right? Understand this. You can't live in the palace with a pit mentality. And likewise, you can't live in the pit with a palace mentality. Get your mind right so God can do what God needs to do with you. At some point, you got to stop looking for revenge and start looking for some righteousness. Listen, Roosevelt-Freeport this morning. I know you've been hurt, but righteousness is still right. Heaven is still our aim. Holiness is still our mandate. How do I operate in this? It's imperative that you remain confident in the God of the harvest, even when he withholds the rain. Reminded of a really quick story of a guy on a boat, and this guy is on a boat with his friends, and he gets the boat turns over because of the storm, and he can't swim, right? But along comes this log, and he just holds on to the log, and he floats on to shore. Everybody else dies, all the storm, and they're trying to swim, right? And gets to the shore, and he takes these other trees and he builds a hut, right? And he goes to find food and come back, and the hut is up in smoke. This is burnt up. And the guy's like, God, why are you doing this to me? This is crazy, right? I've had it. Enough is enough, right? And then pretty soon, what happens is this humongous boat comes, this commercial boat. And the guy comes, and he picks him up, and he's taking him back to his family. And he asks the guy, he said, well, how did you know I was here? He said, because I saw the smoke from the fire in the hut. Okay. The hut never burns if he never makes it to the island. He never makes it to the island, right? If he doesn't float over on the log. He never tries to float if he knows how to swim, because then he drowns with the other, and he never's in that situation unless the boat turns over. What do you say? I'm simply saying this. If you just allow God to do what God is going to do with your hurt, he'll take what other folk meant for evil, and he'll make it for your good. May God bless you. May God keep you. Oh, yeah.